All right, I think I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. Again, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the South Atlantic Coastal Study quarterly webinar. My name is Jenny Bywater, and I'll be helping facilitate the webinar today, along with Jenny Olmstead, who's providing some technical support as needed. Wanted to start with a few housekeeping notes. The lines are currently muted during the webinar, but depending on questions and discussion later, we do have the option to unmute them. But if you have questions or comments or technical difficulties, please go ahead and submit them via the questions and chat box that should be part of your webinar control panel. We will have times to pause and answer submitted questions throughout the presentation. Note that there are also 3 handouts available for download in the handout section of the control panel. There's slides from today's presentation, as well as 2 placemats with summary information on the South Atlantic Coastal Study. Before I hand it over to today's speakers, we wanted to get a little bit of a feel for who's on the line with us today. So I'm going to start a poll shortly with these 5 broad categories to identify kind of who you associate yourself with, but please also take the time to type in the question box with your name and a little bit more about your detailed affiliation. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll now. You should see it coming up on your screen. Give that a minute to collect responses. I'll hold that open a little bit longer. But as a reminder, please do also type in with a little bit more about yourself, just so we know who we have with us today. All right. I think I'm going to go ahead and close that poll for now. Last chance if you want to submit your answer. I'll close the poll and then share so everybody can see kind of our distribution. It looks like we have a mix of kind of federal agencies and tribal nations, as well as state and local agencies, and quite a few people who designated themselves as other. So that'd be great if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit more about yourself in that question and comment section. But I'm now going to hand over the presentation to Ashley Fountain, who's the Regional Project Manager for the South Atlantic Study, to walk through the agenda.
Hey, Jenny, I still see the poll on my view. I don't know if you switched it over yet. Great, thank you. All right, good afternoon, everybody. I am your Regional Project Manager for the South Atlantic Coastal Study, and happy almost September. It was a little breezy where we're at, and I'm like, I can tell fall is in the air. But it's a very exciting time for the South Atlantic Coastal Study. If you haven't been following us, which I hope you have been, our final report has been approved. And so that's happened at the end of July. And it is now with U.S. Army Corps of Engineers headquarters. And today we're going to focus on the availability of those final report products, where you can access all of those, how you can use those moving into the future following the conclusion of STACS, and the availability of our product data that there's been a lot of interest in. So you'll hear from Trevor Lancaster, our geospatial lead, later on today as well. Next slide, please. And thank you to Jenny and Jenny, who are supporting us as our facilitators here. As they mentioned, if you have any questions, we can pause along the way. They'll be monitoring the chat. So please go ahead and feel free to ask any questions there. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I was saying, our STACS report has been approved. Before General Kelly left South Atlantic Division, it was signed. So that's very exciting. And really, this is a watershed planning study, and we couldn't have done it without the collaboration that we have had. There's some slides at the end that talk about all of the meetings that we've had along the way. And I just wanted to say thank you for the collaboration that we've had. We've had quite a few engagements, and your time was very valuable in making all of those. So this is our SACS webpage. Hopefully this is not the first time you have seen this. Our SACS webpage is at the top, the link. And on our webpage, it looks a little different from maybe the last time you've checked it out because our final report products have been posted. Those were posted this month. And I'll talk through those in a minute, but our draft products are also on this slide. All of our previous presentations that we've given are on this webpage. You can catch them from the very first. We've got all of our newsletters that we've sent out and our presentations. So our final report products are posted. They're on our SACS webpage. And if you go to the next slide, please. These are the final report documents. So we have our main report that is dated August of this year. And then we have all of our supporting appendices and as well as our supporting documents. Some of those have been recently finalized as well. So you'll see all our main report, which summarizes all of our findings through the South Atlantic Coastal Study analysis. And then you'll see all of our supplemental appendices, the engineering, geospatial, and outreach, as well as all of our state and territory appendices. So each one of those documents is posted and accessible in its final form. Next slide, please. On the final report page, in that same box, you'll find our recommendation spreadsheet. So the total number of recommendations coming out of the South Atlantic Coastal Study is 204. You may have seen this bar diagram before. We have shown this in previous meetings, but really just kind of showing this because we broke down our recommendations in a number of different ways. So I'll just talk through that just briefly. I think, once the study is concluded by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, everybody wants to know the bluff, the bottom line up front, what came out of it. And so with 204 recommendations, it's not like we can cover each one of those in this meeting. So I wanted to just provide an overview and then share with you a few ways that you can digest all of these recommendations. One way we have this is here on the slide. So as far as one way we broke out our recommendations is timing. So when will they be implemented? So near term, midterm, long term. As you can see, about half of them are near term, a little less than half. So we feel that these recommendations can potentially, assuming all goes well, right, and everything falls into place, can occur within the next 5 years. So that larger portion of the near-term bar on the top is recommendations for Congress. So we have quite a few recommendations for Congress. We have WRDA 2022, we have WRDA 2024 ahead of us, potentially, but what I just want to say here is that, potentially some of these recommendations can be advancing in the near term, in the next 5 years. And we also have midterm recommendations as well as long-term. Those recommendations, the long-term recommendations that are going to take a little longer to implement. Perhaps a Back Bay area was identified as vulnerable, and stakeholders are still trying to figure out how they want to organize in order to address those Back Bay concerns. So identifying key stakeholders is something that takes a while, and who wants to lead these efforts. And so now the SACS has identified these recommendations. We have identified areas that are vulnerable and have these vulnerabilities looking into the future. And so what I see the value in SACS is being that now we have these areas identified. Now we can continue these conversations that we've been having. And in fact, some of our recommendations have already moved forward. So that was kind of a struggle as we were developing this list, because it was constantly, the number was constantly changing as a recommendation potentially moved forward, and we had to remove some actually due to recent appropriations. So I just wanted to leave that there. We've got 204 in total, and we have those in our recommendation summary placemat. That's the next slide, I think. There it is. So as I mentioned, on our very first page under final report products, you can see the recommendation summary spreadsheet with all 204. You can sort them and filter them as you would like. And I know it can be a little overwhelming, but this is just a snapshot of the recommendation summary spreadsheet here. And because it can be so overwhelming, we tried to break it down a little further. And so that is what is on the next page, the next slide. Okay, so on our main SACS webpage, you'll see the final reports. I've talked about that. Our recommendation summary spreadsheet with all 204 of those, with all of our main report and our appendices. You'll also see the final report placemats. Now, these placemats are documents that you may have not seen previously. You may have seen this information within our appendices, but we've tried to squeeze everything into one product that can be used for various reasons. If you're going out and meeting stakeholders in the field, or you've got a meeting coming up and you want to just talk about, Georgia vulnerability, and the SACS recommendations that were coming out of that state, then you can bring this handout. And so I'll show that on the next slide, an example of it. So here is what we're calling our final report placemats. These, as you can see in the header on the back side of this, advancing Georgia recommendations. So we created these placemats to be used not only internally by us, but for you, for everybody as well. If you want just a picture of what came out of the SACS, what was identified, and most importantly, the recommendations on the back that were coming out of the SACS, or most importantly to me, maybe something is more important to you, but I was just thinking, hey, this list is 204. So the team really tried to figure out a way to break it down a little further to make this more easily digestible. Now, if you are looking at the entire region, you can use our 204 recommendations list, or you can just, if you're trying to focus in on a specific location, you can take one of these state and territory specific placemats. So one is created for every state and territory within the SACS that was evaluated. And it has a snapshot on the front. This information has come out of the SACS documents. We also have the Tier 1 composite risk assessment plus sea level rise. So you can have that picture of that coastal risk in that specific state and or territory. And then on the back page, you have all of the recommendations that pertain to that specific area. So these documents are intended to be used and to advance these recommendations. We're just trying to make products available that we can have SACS not just be a report on the shelf, but it's something that we can continue to advance and keep moving forward as we are working towards our shared vision. Let's see. I think that is the last formal slide of mine, and then I'll hand it over to Trevor, and I'll pick it up at the end. But we can pause if there are any questions right now, Jenny. We can try to take a few of those.
Thanks, Ashley. There aren't any current questions submitted in the question box. I did want to point out, though, that one of the handouts that is available is the overview version of that placemat Ashley just described, which kind of gives a big picture overview for the whole regional study area, but gives you a little bit of a flavor of what those placemats look like.
I think we'd have to be in font type 2 if we were going to get all of those 204 on one page. But one more thing I failed to mention before we move over to Trevor is that those placemats for each state and territory are intended to be printed out on 11 by 17. If you print it out on 8.5 by 11, it'll look a little wonky, but it's 11 by 17. You can fold it in half, and we found them to be useful in the instances that we've used them just thus far. So that's it for me. You'll hear from me again in just a few, but I'll pass it over to Trevor Lancaster now, our geospatial lead.
Thanks, Ashley. Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay, Ashley?
Yep, you sound good, Trevor.
Great, thanks, guys. Good afternoon. I'm Trevor Lancaster. I'm our geospatial lead out of the Wilmington district, and I'm going to take a few moments to just step through how to access some of our geospatial products and data sets that we've now made public for release. Next slide, please. So just to circle all the way back, I mean, this is I think our 9th quarterly webinar, and a lot of folks on the line have attended several of them, most of them. But, you know, we have a variety of key products, technical products, and, you know, the supporting backbone for these products ultimately is the data. And so we've got a wide array of geospatial data that has been incorporated into our main report, our state and territory appendices, and a lot of our other technical reports. So we're really excited to kind of be at this point and get this data out there for stakeholders to use and really kind of tailor it to use in their local level, their area of interest. Next slide, please. We've briefed out the SACS GeoPortal in the past, but today's focus is how to actually access the data. The GeoPortal serves kind of as our one-stop shop or a clearinghouse for both data sets and some of our web mapping applications, dashboards, story maps, documentation. So there's quite a bit of information in there. And you've got the URL is in the bottom left. In a moment, I'm going to attempt a live demo just to kind of step through and show people how to access specific data sets moving forward. Next slide, please. And also, it's important to note that this information is all accessible from the SACS study homepage. We have a link there directly to kind of the GeoPortal homepage, but as well as to specific web mapping applications for, say, the Tier 1 risk assessment or the economic risk assessment, things like that. You know, a lot of these products, they all have accompanying reports, but most of them have some geospatial component as well. So these data sets and applications really serve as a complement to those report products and can really help the users or a reader kind of follow along or take a deeper dive on any one specific topic or geographic area. Next slide, please. So we've posted our data, and there's a little bit, one kind of nuance to the platform we're using that I'm going to cover. We are using ArcGIS Online Open Data Platform, which a lot of organizations use to disseminate geospatial information, whether they're state governments, county governments, NGOs. So it's pretty user-friendly, and it's definitely widely used, kind of somewhat of an industry standard for an off-the-shelf geospatial delivery platform. Our vector data, so by vector I mean discrete features, what you consider shapefiles or feature classes. Those data are available via the Open Data Platform, which I'll cover in a second. And then our raster data is going to be a little bit different. There are some limitations on how we can serve out grids or some of our exposure or hazard grids. So we've actually just gone ahead and packaged those up and posted those separately. Next slide, please. So for our Tier 1 risk assessment, this is an example of that raster, that gridded data. We've zipped all that data up for the entire study area and posted that into a single URL that you can hit online. The download includes, this will be for some of our GIS users on the line, TIFF files, raster files, layer files that help symbolize the data. So, you can see the different color stretches or bands and how that data is supposed to look. Map document files or MXDs, these can be brought into both ArcGIS Desktop and ArcGIS Pro for some of our pro users. and as well as metadata records for each data set that allow a user to really look into and see what were our input data sets if we were deriving data from multiple sources, what were some of our kind of nuts and bolts geoprocessing steps to get our final output. So each file, each grid, each layer has its own unique metadata record that really gives in pretty good detail about those data sets. Additionally, I'll add that the geospatial appendix also takes a very good overview of all of that information, and really allows the user to see what specifically our inputs were, and what would be the appropriate use for some of this data. Next slide, please. Our Tier 2 economic risk assessment are available to the census block level. So these are available both via our sites page and the open data interface. These are dollar damage outputs to the census block. And we've also gone ahead and done some of the math for some of our users and aggregated those dollar damages to census places, counties, states, and territories. This really allowed us to look at potentially high risk places and rack and stack and compare places by state to see which incorporated municipalities or towns or cities experienced a higher dollar damage by AEP, or annual exceedance probability, coastal storm flooding event for existing conditions and with sea level rise. Next slide, please. Our environmental resources inundation risk analysis is another one of our key products. These are two parts. One is our raster data. This is our vulnerability and our risk grids. These are packaged similarly to the Tier 1 risk assessment data and is available as a single download. We also have our priority environmental areas, or PEAs. These are vector data that are also available via the open data interface for the sites page, as you see on the screen. Next slide, please. Our sand availability needs determination, or SAND. This data has been published for a while, but if you haven't had a chance to check it out, I definitely encourage you to do so. This download is a file geodatabase download that includes various geographic data related to sand needs, sand sources, RSM optimization, and importantly, in those attribute tables for that data are links to the authoritative documentation for any specific project that is being referenced. So we've linked via the web any detailed project reports, or anywhere we were able to pull quantities or authoritative source information. So there's a lot of great resources, and it's a pretty robust data set in that regard to allow you to quickly discover lots of information about a lot of our coastal storm risk management projects, both federal and non-federal projects. Next slide, please. And finally, our coastal hazard system. These data, we link to the ERDC website via the GeoPortal, but these are not hosted explicitly on the SACS GeoPortal. They are hosted and managed by ERDC, Engineering Research and Development Center. These include wave and water levels derived from numerical modeling at the save point location, so full statistical suite, and they will be managed moving forward. There should be no interruption to availability for these data as well. It is important. I do want to bring up, in the past we were talking through funding sources and how long we'd at least be able to have some of our SACS data available after the study authority expires, but we are happy to announce for at least the next year or so, all of our data will be online and accessible for folks to grab and use and moving forward. We are looking at asking ERDC to host some of the nodal data for the coastal hazard system, and these are the AEP water levels to the ADCIRC model mesh node, which is a finer resolution than the save points. And what this allows us to do is visualize sea level change scenarios and generate depth grids and things like that at a higher resolution. So we're working through that process right now, as we've had some interest from stakeholders. And next slide, please. All right, so I think,
yep, that's the end of the section. I was going to switch over to you as presenter.
Sure.
All right, I think you should have control now.
Great. Not getting the option to do so, Jenny. I love a live demo.
Let's see. I'll try again.
Okay. Here we go. All right. Everybody see my screen okay?
It did come up for me.
Great. So just to kind of circle back, we'll start here. I'll take you guys on a little journey. We'll start here on the SAC study homepage. As I was, Ashley mentioned and I mentioned, all our final reports and placemats are linked here, and we do have direct links to specific, study products as well as the GeoPortal right here, which I'm going to go ahead and kind of already load it up. So this takes us to our homepage, our landing page. Across the top here are a little banner to link directly to different sites pages about each key study product. Also, we have the ability here to search for specific data sets. You can type something into there, and a lot of our data we added keywords to. So if it's related to exposure, hazards, or economic damages, we've added keywords and allowed you to select by category throughout these little icons here. And then finally, towards the bottom, are key products. These view buttons will take you directly to that specific web mapping application, and the details will take you to the sites page with kind of a general overview before you kind of dive right in. So for today's purposes, I've already clicked on this study boundaries button here and popped it up in the next tab. So for example, this is pulls up anything we've tagged with the word boundary. We've got study areas, focus areas, our states and territories. So all of these geographic boundaries we've aggregated with the appropriate SACS data, so we're able to kind of use them in multiple applications, whether it's tier 1 high risk places or economic damages to the state level, things like that. So we've tried to maintain as much flexibility with these data sets as we can. If I were to click on study area here at the top, it will populate this open data interface, which gives a little bit of an overview, some of the documentation associated with it. But the primary focus today is just looking at this download button. And just by clicking this, it will populate a list of options for us to download here. There we go. And so you can choose from, a CSV for just attribute table information, KMLs for Google Earth, shapefiles for various GIS software, CAD software, file geodatabase, and GeoJSONs. There should be metadata records that pull through when you download these as well, so they'll be attached to those file downloads. Moving forward, next I'm going to take a look at how to get to some of our gridded data. So we're back to our home page here. And if I were to click on the details for the Tier 1 risk assessment, this button right here, it will populate the sites page associated with the Tier 1 risk assessment. We have a general overview of the methodology and kind of what the purpose of this data set is, some of the inputs, and ultimately link to our viewer here that allows people to kind of dive in. And lastly, the newest kind of add here is the Tier 1 risk assessment download. If you were to click on that, it will populate, crop the zip file. People are familiar with that, to download the full package there. Similarly, for the economic risk assessment, so I've clicked on the details for the Tier 2 economic risk assessment, provides a general overview for this information, and allows us to link directly to the census blocks, which is, we're kind of just skipping a step, searching for the data, and just going directly to that resource here. And this gives you a full write-up overview, and will prompt the same kind of format downloading if you were to click download on the side here. that's really the general overview, and here you can see all of your different file type options after you populate it. So we've really tried to make the data as accessible as possible. We've added links and different item details like this, linked them from our site pages, added keywords. So we hope that everybody can find something they're looking for as they read through the South Atlantic Coastal Study. But if anyone has any questions or has trouble getting to a resource, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to point you in the right direction. So with that, I think I'll turn it back to you guys, and I'll take any questions any folks might have.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll wait to take control just in case there are questions where it's helpful for you to kind of navigate the screen. Still not seeing anything in the question box. If people do have questions and it's easier for you to just raise your hand, there is a little hand function that you should be able to click, and we can unmute your line. Or if you just want to type in the box, like, I have a question, call on me, we can unmute you. But can just hold for a second to see if anybody does have questions or comments. So far, not seeing anything come in. I'll go ahead and grab screen share back from you.
Thank you. Thanks, Trevor. I'm glad that the live demo worked.
Thanks, everyone.
And I think I'm back to sharing screens now.
Yes, I can see it.
Great. And
all right,
I think it's back to you, Ashley.
Yes, thank you, Jenny. So just, again, the purpose of today's quarterly webinar was just to kind of provide those updates of where you can find all of our final products and our data sets that we've been asked about throughout the study. Those are now available, and as we're moving forward, next slide, please. This will be our final webinar. We submitted we shared or posted our final newsletter as well. So this is going to be the last large engagement for our SAC stakeholders. So we just wanted to formally say thank you. I was going through names here that we have on our attendee list, and I see a lot of names with agencies that we have worked with and alongside for our focus area workshops and to develop these products. So really just thank you all. And we also have our regional PM who kicked the South Atlantic Coastal Study off, Pam Caston. She's joining us from the West Coast. So thanks, Pam, for being on today. But yeah, just a few numbers here to highlight. We've had, I think, great attendance at our webinars all along the way, lots of engagement at our focus area workshops. I think it's pretty impressive to have a stakeholder email list of 1,300 people. I know it could be much larger, but I feel like we have reached out into South Atlantic Division here. And then just as Trevor was wrapping up, we pulled the last number of counts of visits to our GeoPortal, and that was over 55,000. So it seems like these products are being used, which makes us all very happy. I know that the entire team put a lot of effort into it, so hopefully you will continue to use these for the foreseeable future. The next slide just shows, what's next for these 204 recommendations that we have. We have that list there. Each of our districts within South Atlantic Division are going to take, the lead in trying to advance these recommendations in here. So the field will be working, each of our districts will be working to advance these together, because this is a watershed planning study and it's not only what the Corps can do, but what we can all do here. There are some recommendations that are just for the Army Corps though, and so we'll be working those through. And if you have any questions or how you can stay connected or how you would like to work together to advance a recommendation, feel free to reach out to your district project manager. And I would encourage you to check out that list of final recommendations. We have the full list with all 204, or we have the placemats that have the list by each state and territory. So you can check out either one of those. And then if you are using these products, let us know. It's always good as we are trying to figure out the future for some of these products and tools. Like Trevor mentioned, these products will be available at least for the next year. But they are pulling from data sources, right? And so when new data sources come online, then these tools can be kind of a little out of date. So we are trying to figure out that path forward. They will be available for the next year, the foreseeable future here. But we'd like to know if you are using those, so let us know. And then the very last slide is, how are you going to let us know? We've got our contact information here. So just thank you again. That concludes our formal presentation, but we are going to remain here on the line if there are any questions.
Great, thanks, Ashley. And just a reminder, the slide deck is available as one of the handouts as part of the webinar, so you can download it and have access to this slide, all the links, all the email addresses that you might need. And then following the conclusion of today, we'll also post the slides and a recording of the webinar to the SACS website. Yeah, happy to take any questions. Definitely see some congratulations coming into the team, which are well deserved. But feel free, to raise your hand or to continue to write in if anybody has any questions or comments.
Thanks, Jenny. I'm monitoring. I don't see any. Thank you for the kind words there in the chat. Again, we really appreciate it, and we look forward to advancing these recommendations in the future. So thanks, everybody. We'll hang on here for another minute or so. But if we don't see any come through, I appreciate you. All right, Jenny, I'm seeing the attendees list drop, so I don't see any other.
I think we're wrapped on our end. We'll go ahead and download just the chat log. So we have everybody's information who joined us today. And then we'll go ahead and close out the webinar. So just one more minute of holding while we save those files down.
Yes, no problem. Thank you both so much.
Yep. All right, I think I should have them now. So thanks again, Ashley and Trevor, for presenting today and reporting out. I'm going to go ahead and close the webinar.
Okay, great. We'll get these posted to the webpage. Thanks, Jenny.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.